So let's talk about microinverters now. They're a little bit different. Each inverter is installed on the back of the panel. So microinverters perform the same basic function as string inverters, except they're installed underneath each solar panel on your roof. Each of these microinverters is about the same size as an internet router. So the big difference between microinverters and string inverters is that the solar panel installation with microinverters will typically have the same number of inverters as it does solar panels. Now, what are the pros? Rapid shutdown capability. New electrical codes require rapid shutdown for first responders or firefighters to make sure that they're safe from high voltage when they need to be on rooftops or they're servicing power lines. Microinverters comply with these rapid shutdown requirements and have the capability embedded in each of the modules. So if we go back to when we first started this training, we talked about solar-only systems do not function when the grid is down. It's because power being fed back to the grid is dangerous to utility workers. More electricity is a huge pro. So the core advantage of microinverters is that theoretically you can yield more solar electricity. The reason for this is because there's slight differences in currents between the panels. What is current? It's the amperage, right? It's the flow. When solar panels are in a string, the current is reduced to that of the least producing panel in the string. Well, because these work independently, and because they're converting power independently, if one panel gets shaded, the rest of the system is not affected. No other panel is affected by the least producing panel in the system. Now, their suitability for challenging installations is great. So we talked about multiple azimuths before. You're not going to want to do a string inverter on a multiple azimuth because if you have an east-facing roof and a south-facing, and they're tied in the same string, that south-facing, though it should yield more power, is going to produce what the east-facing does. So, if a solar system is facing multiple azimuths, means you're facing some south, some east, some west, and then microinverters are going to be the way to go. If you have shading issues from large trees or chimneys, again, microinverters are going to be best. In these situations, solar panels will be producing different amounts of electricity at different times of the day. But microinverters will ensure that you harvest all of the energy, while the standard inverter, you'll lose some of this production during the day. The lifespan is longer. Now, microinverters typically have 25-year warranties, and like we mentioned before, the string inverters typically have 8 to 12. The reliability of microinverters was in question many years ago, but technology has since caught up with itself, and the long warranties of microinverters show the confidence that manufacturers have in their products now. Panel level monitoring is one of the biggest advantages, and people love this because you get to see what each panel is able to produce. So microinverters and the add-on optimizers add the ability to track production of each individual panel. While a standard inverter, you can only track the whole system production. And then system expansion is pretty easy because if you want to add panels, you just add another panel with another inverter right on the back of it. So you don't need to purchase an entire different string inverter to go on with your system expansion. It's just each inverter for each panel. Now, the main disadvantage to microinverters is the price. They're typically $1,000 or more expensive with a string inverter on a standard 5 kilowatt residential solar installation. Maintenance isn't as great either. So, if one of the microinverters was to fail, not only would be detecting which one of the failed would be a challenge, but once you did, servicing and replacing the component is not as easy as plopping off the string inverter and putting a new one on the side of the house. So the installer gets up on the roof and they have to mess with the racking and then bolt the solar modules and replace the microinverters and reestablish the AC conversion capability. So there's an entire process that we go through every time something like this goes out. Now, the amount of hardware on the roof can be concerning. They have been referred to before as miniature lightning rods. So, since there's microinverters attached to each solar panel on the roof, there's a lot of expensive metal equipment up there. Microinverters may act as miniature lightning rods. If you're in a storm-prone area and you have an historical wooden structure with shake roofing materials, you might want to think twice before installing this one.